Excerpt from the 2008 HBO miniseries, John Adams. Here, Adams nominates fellow congressional delegate George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the new Continental Army resisting the British, courtesy Warner Brothers Discovery under fair use.
Those of the Massachusetts delegate should lead this force.
Gentlemen, we move too quickly. We have not yet resolved the question of any Continental Army, much less who is to lead it.
I have but one gentleman in mind, known to all of us. Mr. President, I propose as Commander-in-Chief our most honorable and esteemed delegate, the good gentleman from Virginia, Colonel George Washington. Second.
I commend your selection, sir. There is no more able soldier in all America. Colonel Washington would command approbation in all Americans were he to accept the position that it is now our great honor to offer him.
If the Congress sees fit to honor me with the command, it will be my humble duty to serve.
By your modesty, you show the wisdom of our choice.
True crime.
Sex.
Political conspiracy.
Celebrity gossip.
Murder.
UFOs.
Crooked officials.
The occult. Assassination.
Courtroom drama. Rape.
Corporate scams.
Scandal Sheets.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scandal Sheet. My name is Thad Housley, and today we are celebrating, in our own special way, the birthday of the first President of the United States, George Washington. And I am joined, as always, by my amazing co-host, Anurata. Anurata, how much do you know about the man on the $1 bill?
Well, I would not exactly say I'm an expert, but I do like money.
So that's your primary attachment to that stoic figure. Okay, but you are in luck because on Urata we have a very special guest today that can be described as an expert, and in fact works professionally at the historic Mount Vernon plantation, George and Martha Washington's home for many decades of their life, up until their death. And so let's give a warm Scandal Sheet welcome to Matt KOHLER. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here.
So Matt, welcome. This is your first time on the podcast. Do you want to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself?
Oh, of course. Thanks, you guys, for having me on today. I am a public historian by trade. I have been studying Virginia history in depth since undergraduate studies at Shenandoah University, particularly the American Civil War era, but I do have more familiarity with colonial history as well. Now, to that end, I'm actually pursuing a master's degree right now at Liberty University in order to fully round out my academic training and to become a properly trained academic Virginian historian.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Thank you. So, Matt, getting on the subject, our subject today, every fifth grader in the U.S. probably thinks that she or he knows everything they need to know about George Washington. But despite being the top general during the American Revolution, the first president of the United States, and having his face on the dollar bill, his life was actually a lot more challenging and complicated than at first glance, wasn't it? I mean, how do you introduce Mr. Washington, or do you call him General Washington, to the countless guests that you interpret for?
Well, he is General Washington. He preferred that. He thought Mr. President was John Adams. And that's why when you go to visit General Washington at his tomb, you will see "Here lies the remains of General Washington." George,
gotcha.
And not, Mr. President. We always introduce him from his leadership perspective. I work in a Revolutionary War encampment at Mount Vernon, so we are more focused on his military leadership and his style of his tactile style and administering discipline. So when we talk about Washington, we really want to focus on how we integrate not only that leadership style, but also his familiarity with, commonalities amongst the enlisted men. He grew up here at Mount Vernon, or he didn't grow up at Mount Vernon, but he spent many of his formative years at Mount Vernon after he becomes a land surveyor and a colonel in the Virginia militia.
Right.
When he returns to Mount Vernon, the whole aspect becomes how did he settle into his private life? He always wanted to have a private life away from public service. And that's one of the things that we always have to emphasize for folks is that his life was dedicated to the country, but all he really wanted was to rest at home.
So deep down, he was a homeboy, even though he ended up, doing all these incredible things. So.
Exactly right. Yeah, as a first president of the United States, as the commander-in-chief of the Army, he really is a captivating figure in American history, and I hope to shed some light on some of the more unknown things about Washington today.
Okay, cool.
So, Matt, unfortunately, we can't cover his whole life in this one podcast. But before we talk about his career and, his role as general and president, is there like a little known anecdote about his life before he became famous that you can share with us?
Does barely surviving smallpox at age 19 count?
Ayo, that'll do.
Washington, on his trip to Barbados with his older brother Lawrence, actually contracts the disease. He is one of the few people who survived the very infectious and very virulent disease and in the 18th century. And in one of the aspects really does shed light on one of his future endeavors when he becomes commander-in-chief of the Army. And that is his forced inoculation of soldiers against the disease. He does so in the spring of 1777 when he's encamped at Morristown. And Morristown, of course, is one of the more brutal of the winter encampments that the Army faced. Valley Forge is the famous one. I think it was the largest camp and the longest camp. But Morristown really was nothing to bat an eye at. When the disease spread across the Army, Washington knew what he was in for. So he actually takes the very, on my view, courageous step to quarantine some of the soldiers again who are infectious, taking some of their pustules that come out of their skin, maintaining that virus. They would have a little pox pot, and they would maintain that virus as in a live state, and they would actually transport it into another healthy individual in order to prevent further spread of the disease.
So this is an early form of vaccination, right?
We like to say inoculation.
Inoculation
is different than vaccination in the fact that this is using a live portion of the virus, whereas modern vaccine kind of uses an inert version.
Okay, gotcha. But either way, RFK Jr. probably would not have approved of this technique, right?
Forced inoculation is very scandalous in my view. I mean, these guys had no idea. They were just told that this is a temporary assignment. They don't know why they're being quarantined until after the fact, of course. You have a Dr. William Shippen Jr., Washington tasked with carrying out this endeavor.
So, I guess, I mean, what you're saying is that because Washington himself had survived smallpox, he had gained immunity, and it gave him this insight that if you can survive it, then you'll be immune to it for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, they understood a very basic, rudimentary form of germ theory. They weren't even boiling water to fully understand that boiled water cleaned it, as opposed to drinking, acquiring dysentery from dirty water. But yes, Washington himself surviving the disease gave him perspective. I think that others weren't fully understanding. He himself, we believe, became unable to have children because of his affliction. So Washington, maybe out of some sorts of altruistic motivation really wants to not only preserve his army, but care for his soldiers.
So, Matt, we often give Washington credit for winning the American Revolution, but in reality, he boasts very few personal military successes. In fact, he got really whooped on a number of occasions. And I know you wanted to talk about the New York and New Jersey campaigns, which almost resulted in the loss of the war, even as early as 1776. So you want to walk us through those?
But yes, so the British successes in the summer and fall of 1776 throughout New York were due to the overwhelming naval and land superiority, as well as a lack of professionalism in the Continental Army, really. Washington had only been in command for less than 1 year at this point. Until this time, his only achievement being the successful liberation of Boston in the spring of 76,
right,
signaled to the British that more force would be required to subdue the rebellion. In response to that, in response to their fledgling efforts in Massachusetts, which really was a black eye on the leadership there, the British planned an invasion of New York, spearheaded by, you may have heard of these guys, two brothers, General William and Admiral Richard Howe.
Yeah.
Yes. So utilizing the Navy to maneuver around the waterways, these two commanders devised a strategy to attack the colonials on Long Island, at Brooklyn Heights, and at Manhattan, forcing Washington to retreat every time. I think that might be what you're getting at. Washington's ultimate disadvantage here wasn't so much his inability to command an army, but the army was just overwhelmed by marine and land units from the British. So Washington's efforts preserved the army, of course, for further engagements at such as Harlem Heights and White Plains. All the while, the Continental Army struggled with shortages of ammunition, clothing, food, and transportation. So these weaknesses made sustained defense of fixed positions nearly impossible and forced repeated retreats. So to sort of combat that, Washington faced an uphill battle within his own army. This is really important. Many American soldiers were new recruits whose enlistments were expiring. It wouldn't be until 78 that Congress actually will pass 3-year enlistments. But poor training and wavering morale led to collapses under pressure, especially when facing disciplined British regular troops. So what we all know, though, is the famous Christmas night raid on the Hessian troops at Trenton. So, of course, after the defeats of Fort Washington and Fort Lee in November, Washington devised and executed that Christmas night plan to flip the balance of power. Washington was forced to encamp at Morristown, which is what we were just talking about just a moment ago, about the forced inoculations to where they took place.
The Christmas Day attack that you mentioned, or the day after Christmas,
Yeah.
That was tactically brilliant, right? I mean, people do give him credit for that because it was a surprise attack, right? And he had crossed the Delaware in the middle of the night with like 18 cannon and, 2,500 guys. So that people give him credit for, correct?
So the people give him very much credit for that, but really it's more impressive to realize that a third of his troops didn't make it across the river.
Right.
The other thing is it wasn't that image of Washington on the bow of the ship with his leg raised and they have the guys pushing the ice out of the way. Telling the back trying to stay warm. He wasn't as gallant in that image as he was crossing that river. But of course, the effort propelled them into overwhelming success is coming in the coming term.
I was just going to make a quick joke. Is
Is
this where the person comes and goes, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Is that the same thing?
Actually, that was like a year and a half earlier when Paul Revere was running around with Lexington and Concord, like in April of 75. Sorry.
I may add that it wasn't that the British were coming, it was that the regulars were out.
Oh, but does that sound as catchy? The regulars are out. We can still make it.
We'll have to exhume Paul Revere's body and let him know that we're doing a rewrite. We're retconning him a little bit. So,
Well, actually, another tragedy that occurred during the war, Washington was actually completely fooled and betrayed by one of his favorite generals, Benedict Arnold, which, I remember the name too. But a humiliation he actually never got over. And in the US today, Arnold is considered the greatest traitor in our history. What do you think about that, Matt?
I think it's a proper characterization. Unfortunately, if he had taken a bullet into his chest at Saratoga instead of his second time in his leg, he would have died an American hero.
Right.
Yeah.
But Washington's full faith in Benedict Arnold came to fruition when he decided when Arnold decides that he will no longer don the coat of the Continental Army and he wants to become a British Major General. But that does not occur. That the British themselves don't even really trust a traitor of their own making. One of the fewer discussed aspects of Benedict Arnold is actually his wife. His wife's alleged affair with the spy master John Andre. So it is.
I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah,
This is getting spicy.
Yeah, it is. It is very suspicious that Benedict Arnold did not just come to this decision on his own, and perhaps was maybe coerced into it.
Maybe this is a secret love story we don't know about. The jaded lover. So he betrays the country.
Well, and I think wasn't Andre Benedict Arnold's contact on the British side, and Arnold never got caught, right? But Andre did, and he was executed. Was that
That's
not
correct.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
So the thing about Arnold is that he's more than just a gallant war hero of the early years of the war. I mean, he really was he and Ethan Allen really were the spearhead at the Fort Ticonderoga battle that allowed Henry Knox to then take that cannon from Fort Ticonderoga down to Boston later on. But his betrayal of Washington, I think, never really sat well with Washington, but also never really was fully understood. I think Washington may have spent the latter part of his years becoming engrossed in why Arnold may have made this decision, but Arnold retreats to England, and we never have any more documentation about any of the conversation that Washington had about Arnold after that.
And it must have been a tremendous humiliation for him because, I mean, among a lot of things people give him credit for is he was a tremendous judge of character. I mean, he discovered a lot of people like Alexander Hamilton or what have you, who, was like this brilliant guy who, immigrant from whatever, he came from Barbados or something like that. I mean, but he totally missed on Arnold, right? He just did not, he put all of his trust in him, had no idea. Wasn't he actually going to have breakfast with him the day Arnold defected?
That is a very good observation. I think Arnold, like Washington, realized that he was only going to achieve so much success, and Washington in the British colonial Virginia militia was never going to be made a general. Because that was a policy of the British. Now, when Arnold decides that he wants to become a general in the British Army, they actually do the same thing. They actually are very hesitant to promote a colonial. So I think there is a bit of a familiarity or relational understanding between Washington and perhaps why Arnold wanted more prestige. But nonetheless, you don't betray your country and then think you're going to become a figurehead in history.
Right. And then, like you said earlier, then the guys that you defected to, they don't trust you either, right? They're like, well, you defected from your own country, dude. When are you going to turn on us?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, he's a double traitor. He was treasonous towards the British crown when he joins the Continental Army, and then he betrays his military commission to that Congress and becomes effectively a double traitor.
Speaking of humiliation, so I know while president, Washington's reputation was actually severely tarnished by the Jay Treaty. So though it temporarily maintained peace with Britain, it was actually extremely unpopular with Americans because he seemed to sell out to England and betray our French allies. So I think there were even calls for his impeachment. I mean, what do you think about that, Matt?
For Washington, I think that it's not a tarnished legacy. He really did find a way to take care of public perception of his legacy, and in real
Mhm.
time. I think that Washington really understood that he was a man not only of the people but of history, and would
Yeah.
become one of the most revered of the founding era.
So here's another school kid question. Is it true Washington eventually lost every tooth in his mouth?
So Washington, at the time of his death, was experiencing a lot of bad dental hygiene. Washington, it's not true that he had wooden teeth. In fact,
Okay.
he did have a dentist, and his dentist made a set of dentures for him out of hippopotamus ivory and human teeth. Now,
Oh,
we could presuppose that those human teeth may have come from deceased individuals, but we don't know that for certain. We also don't know that they weren't extracted from enslaved individuals. So it is very unlikely that Washington had wooden teeth, but he did have a doctor named Dr. Greenwood. So I think that that might be one of the few reasons. One of the few
Okay, so
reasons.
he wore dentures. So other people always say that the one of the reasons every single painting you see of him, he always has his mouth closed and he's not smiling because he was embarrassed of his teeth.
I think
Is
that's
that true?
true. I think that that's true. I think Washington was a man of great civility, and he did not want to come across as anything but a proper gentleman. And he had 3 sets of these dentures made. Mount Vernon does have a set. Their newly renovated education center will boast these original pieces this
Cool.
coming year. So if anybody has the ability to go visit Mount Vernon in our listening and viewing area here, please come see these dentures that we're talking about in person.
So was it common that everybody would like lose their teeth in their 40s, or did he have a particular dental condition that was particular to him?
He had particularly poor dental hygiene, yes. Uh,
Okay.
he himself, I don't know how common it would have been for folks, but I can tell you that a means of earning income was to extract your teeth and to sell them.
oh,
This is not uncommon in colonial times, and even a little bit afterwards. But uh,
You're
wa-
saying for other people's dentures, I would sell my tooth to so that somebody would make dentures for a rich guy.
just the way you would sell your hair for a wig today.
Okay. Wow. I know, but hair grows back.
It's true. We are we're only
What?
getting to these here.
so
Uh,
sad. If I don't have any teeth next episode, you know why? I
I,
sold them all.
and I maybe I'll take one because I've got a missing tooth. So, okay. So now this is the really cool story that no one's ever heard of. So you've got the question on your own.
Yeah, well, this would not be Scandal Sheet without us talking about some scandals. So, we do have a fascinating story about an attempted grave robbery from the family cemetery that very few people have actually heard about. Matt, can you tell our viewers about that story?
People believe that Washington's skull was actually taken. It was not. There was a disgruntled former employee who was a gardener under the tutelage of John Augustine Washington II. He was fired for incompetence. This gentleman decided to come back to the estate at night and wanted to show Washington II that he would show him and take his most prized possession, his uncle's skull. So this gentleman actually wound up with a relative of Washington's nephew, Judge Bushrod Washington. His wife, Anna Blackburn, had several of their family members interred in the vault as well. The old family vault is located right along the hillside, along the Potomac shores, and it was in quite bad shape at the time. So when Washington's will was read, Washington had believed that a new tomb should be suitably situated at the base of the nursery. Unfortunately, this does not happen for another 30 years. So when this grave robbing story occurs, they're still working in that old family vault, very much an earthen dug single room crypt. Now,
so it's above ground. It's not underground.
It's not
Like
underground, but it is dug into the earth. So it's dug.
Okay.
It's dug at a horizontal fashion into the hillside there.
Okay.
And-
Okay.
and
Got it.
Covered and covered as well.
But in order to steal anybody's remains, you got to go in there with a pickaxe and start like breaking
Well,
into
that's the interesting thing. So the vault
Okay.
door would have been open, easily open, but the coffins of those inside vary in quality. One of the few saving graces for Washington is that he was in a lead-lined coffin, which was only opened when he was reinterred in the new tomb. Only ever opened once. The very common or very simple coffin for the Blackburn resident, the Blackburn family member who actually had their skull taken, would have been more of a modest cedar box. But that gentleman, when he takes the skull, he actually winds up in Alexandria, of all places, thinking that he's going to be able to procure a buyer. He is caught, arrested, and the skull was returned eventually. But it does become a sense of lore at Mount Vernon, because many of us know the story, but it doesn't become publicly known until a guest asks about it. And we love sharing all these really unique stories that we've heard over our years at Mount Vernon. But this one in particular really does stick with me because it's a great illustration of the years after Washington, the mismanagement that the House falls into, and ultimately the Mount Vernon Ladies Association assumed control in the middle 19th century because of efforts or lack thereof from people like John Augustine Washington II.
Mm-hmm. Now, did the perpetrator think that he had George Washington's skull, or was he like, well, I can't get Washington's, I'll take somebody else's, and then, just kind of pawn it off like it was his? Did he know that, or was he misinformed?
I think he was misinformed.
Okay.
I think that Washington, or I think that this perpetrator felt that he had Washington's actual skull, and when he was apprehended and he found out that it wasn't actually one, he must have felt like a fool.
Okay. Because they probably went to his actual coffin. They said, well, he never even got into the lead-lined coffin. Yeah. So, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so, what a letdown.
I ended up with Bob's skull. Doggone it. Who's Bob anyway? I don't know. Matt, we've got some great stories here, but I can't let you go. And I'm sure they ask, kids ask you about this all the time, without asking about the enslaved people that lived on the plantation. Now, is it true? Was Washington a slaveholder? And why did he maintain it for so many years? And then is it also true that he eventually freed everybody?
Washington is a product of his time. Many of these early founding fathers, especially in Virginia, were enslavers. It is a very difficult portion to reconcile with when they're fighting for liberty of all men.
Mm-hmm.
It seems a little hypocritical, doesn't it?
He, unlike every other founding father, is the only one to actually manumit his enslaved persons upon the death of his wife, Martha.
Now that's the technical word for freeing a slave, manumission.
So I'll give it to you like this. Abraham Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation from a edict. That is the difference between a personally owning an enslaved person versus having the government proclaim that they are henceforth and forever free. Manumission is something that Washington comes to accept as the only right course of action, and we can argue that he doesn't fully embrace manumission because again, the caveat there, it wasn't upon his death, it was upon the death of his wife. Now, she does not wait for her death to occur. She will manumit all of the enslaved persons. Now, the unfortunate portion of the enslaved persons that were at Mount Vernon, which there were 317 in 1799.
Wow.
About 123 of them were outright owned by the Washingtons, or rented by neighbors. The rest were part of what were called a dower enslavement, a dowry. The dower slaves were those property of the Daniel Parke Custis estate, Martha Washington's first husband, to be inherited by her grandchildren. So you have a blending of families from both the dower slaves and those owned by the Washingtons, some rented by neighbors. So it wasn't just all of a sudden every single person at Mount Vernon was freed. This was not the case. In fact, many that were not part of that manumission continued a life of enslavement, and their families continued to live in bondage. Now, I will say one of the few lights in this story is that when Washington's enslaved persons are freed, they actually don't move very far away. They set up a community called Gum Springs, which is in northern Fairfax County, right along the Route 1 corridor.
Interesting.
And what happens there is they will actually continue to work on the Mount Vernon estate as wage laborers.
Sounds a lot like the post-Civil War, right? A lot of the, supposedly free after the 13th Amendment, supposedly free people, they end up working on the same property they were before, but for wages.
But for wages, I think the sharecropping that we see in the post-Civil War period is a little bit different. These people are property owners.
Okay.
They do hold, they're freeholders, as they call them. They do own property, but because of their familial relations and their obvious familiarity with the Mount Vernon estate, they made the best options for producing at the estate.
Right. Okay. So I went through all the stuff I had. Matt, is there something else you think it'd be important to say on the occasion of the birthday of our first president that you want people to hear?
Well, I have one story that is, it doesn't include Washington himself, but Washington is advised of what happens during the American Revolution. The war only comes to Mount Vernon one time, and that is when a British warship, the HMS Savage, moors off of Mount Vernon in the Potomac River, and the manager of the estate, Lund Washington, who was the cousin of George Washington, actually acquiesced to a request for food and drink from the British. And when Washington finds out about this, he is livid. He would have rather the British burn Mount Vernon than provide aid and comfort to the enemy.
Wow.
And this is because how does it look that he's the overall commander of American forces, and here he is acquiescing to the British, So this is something that is, I wouldn't necessarily call it a scandal, but it is something that's a little bit less known, a little bit more on brand, I think, with what you're looking for.
Well, okay. And the other thing is that, obviously, if, the British forces are there, Lund, the cousin, he's sitting there with 300 slaves who probably don't know anything. What's he going to, the guy says, okay, I'm going to refuse you food and drink. The guy could just kill him and burn the place down anyway, right?
Correct.
The British could. What could he possibly do? How could he defend himself?
He couldn't, because there was never a garrison at Mount Vernon. That's one of the
right, exactly, yeah.
People don't know is when they come to visit Mount Vernon, they see a Revolutionary War encampment there. They think, oh, of course, this is to defend Mount Vernon. Well, no, Washington left Mount Vernon in private hands. But it was especially concerning to him that it hit the perception that it gave to the rest of the colonies or the states fighting, that he acquiesces when he's talking about total submission and warfare.
Okay. Well, no, you're right, because he's very, very sensitive to his appearance and his legacy and his stature, right?
Optics are everything for Washington.
Yeah. Okay, so look, that just about wraps it up, everybody. Happy George Washington's birthday, and I want to thank our guest, Matt KOHLER, for sharing some of his expertise on General George Washington. And thank you again, Matt, and I hope you'll consider joining us again in the future.
Oh, this was a lot of fun. Thank you both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Please follow or subscribe to Scandal Sheet on your favorite pod platform. And share it with all your friends. We'd also love it if you'd leave us a shameless, over-the-top rave review on Apple Podcasts especially. That helps us build audience. And we would really appreciate it if you could support us on Patreon, where you can enjoy premium bonus content for less than the price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Just go to patreon.com/scandalsheet. Also, we want to hear from you. You can reach us online at Facebook or X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, or TikTok. Or just send us an email to scandalsheetpod@gmail.com. See you next time on Scandal Sheet!
Copyright 2026, Thad Helsley Media, LLC, all rights reserved.